This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. So this game just ended, and I want to give my thoughts about this game. And the overwhelming feeling, and maybe I'm being too reactionary here, right? Maybe I'm just reacting to what I saw, but I usually do a good job of separating that. I don't think that's the case. I think this is just where the team is, unfortunately. But watching this game, watching the end of this game unfold the way it did, I think it's going to be really tough for Kevin to survive this season. I understand that a lot of people will be happy to hear that. I understand a lot of people will be upset to hear it. It's going to be a polarizing move no matter what they do or don't do at the head coach position after this year. But in my opinion, if they don't pull out a win here on Thursday against the Steelers, I don't expect Kevin to get fired after that game, but I wouldn't be shocked if something came down the pipe where Kevin Stefanski was fired or relieved in the middle of the season. I think the two coach of the years, it doesn't save him from the failure of this season, compound with the failure of 2021. But I think the two coach of the years saves him from being fired in the middle of the season. And I don't know where Jimmy Haslam's head is, because ultimately he's the guy who's going to make the call on this, right? If Jimmy is not bothered at all by what's going on this season, then okay. I have concerns about if he's not bothered at all by how this season is going. But I understand the need to, when reactionary decisions has failed this franchise so long, I understand not wanting to be reactionary to a point to where you're not going to do anything about how bad this season has gone. I also know that Jimmy has been somebody who has been known to make decisions after that Pittsburgh game, especially if this team is profoundly disappointing. And this team this year is profoundly disappointing. And I think what made me feel like Kevin's days are more numbered than not watching this game is the overall and absolute lack of effort from this football team at the end of this game versus the Saints. This did not look like a team that was still in the fight, that still cared who their coach was going to be next year. This looked like a team that's just out there playing football under whoever. It does not feel like this is Kevin's team right now. When I say that, I mean it doesn't feel like Kevin has his fingers on the switches to be able to push this team to do what they need to do. In 2022, in 2023, it felt like he had that. In 2020, it felt like he had that. Even in 2021, you weren't embarrassed by the effort that the Cleveland Browns had. There were just some individual performances that were so bad that you couldn't overcome. This isn't that. This feels like this team is disconnected from the messaging coming from the entire coaching staff right now. It doesn't feel like people are bought in. It feels like people are checked out. And on one hand, yeah, you can say it's the record that has them checked out. But part of the reason for justifying Kevin Stefanski surviving this year, part of the reason for wanting Kevin Stefanski to stay on as head coach is because continuity makes it easier to build culture. But If that culture is not there anymore, and it does not look like it's there right now, then what exactly are you preserving? That is the concern for me. This team went out not swinging against the Chargers, and then they came off a bye week versus another bad team, right? With the Chargers, I was willing to cut you some slack because the Chargers are one of the better teams in football right now. But the Saints aren't that. And you came off a bye week, and it didn't feel like you had the better culture than the team that just fired their coach. It didn't feel like you had better camaraderie than the team that just fired their head coach. And if there's nothing there to preserve when it comes to locker room leadership, locker room culture, all of these things that we think that the coach is in charge of, especially when they're not calling plays anymore, what are we preserving? And look, I'm saying this is somebody who has been favorable to Kevin because I've seen how well he can technically do his job. I've always been critical of his failures at the people stuff when it comes to his job. It came up with Joe Woods. It's coming up right now. It came up a couple of years ago. The problem with Kevin is the people stuff. And you thought last year they took a big step to fixing the people stuff. But this year, the people stuff is an issue. And I get it. The Browns aren't a perfect team this year. Maybe we were dreaming, thinking that this team's floor coming into the season was 10 wins. So maybe we should have just had our expectations adjusted. But nobody thinks that this team should be 2 in whatever they are right now. 2-8. 2-8. With a strong chance to be 2-9. They shouldn't be world beaters right now. I'll give you that. The Browns have not been playing at a high enough level to suggest that they should be world beaters. Even if they were healthy, even if they had a franchise quarterback, they wouldn't be up there with Buffalo or Pittsburgh or Baltimore. They wouldn't be up there. I get that. But they shouldn't be a 2-win football team. You expect your coach to provide a floor for your team, right? There's two people that you expect to provide a floor. Your head coach, your quarterback. Well, we know our quarterback stinks, and our coach can't provide that floor either. The culture doesn't feel like a winning culture. I'm watching guys jog down Taysom Hill as he destroyed you all game. The lack of effort, the apathy on the team, the inability all season to get these guys ready for a game. Like, the Browns have not started a single game where I'm like, oh, they ready to play. Not one game. That's the stuff that I look at and go, I don't know if Kevin can survive that, man. Because I don't know what the argument is for him to survive it. And I'm saying this again as somebody who has been able to see what Kevin's been able to accomplish a lot clearer than most. But I'm looking at this right now, and I'm thinking we just don't want to, like, with Kevin, I don't know. He's the hardest one to justify keeping at this point, especially if you lose to Pittsburgh. Because everything that we thought was a floor with Kevin Stefanski coming into this year has been wiped out. Kevin doesn't lose 2 games back-to-back. This year, he done lost 2 games back-to-back more than I can count. Right? Coming into the season, Kevin does great in division games. Well, lost to the Bengals. Kevin doesn't lose to the Bengals. Lost to the Bengals. A lot of the stuff that we thought was Kevin providing a floor has fallen through. Now, maybe it's just an off year for Kevin, but it's going to be tough. And I think Kevin and Andrew Berry are a package deal. So maybe the only thing keeping Kevin in charge is the fact that getting rid of Andrew Berry would be simply inconvenient right now. Now, I don't know if Andrew Berry has done enough to justify his job because his job takes much longer to evaluate. Right, with Kevin and Stefanski, you can evaluate what they're doing week to week, win-loss record, effort on the field. All of that stuff is immediately evaluatable for Kevin Stefanski. For Andrew Berry, the truth is we won't know what this 2023 class looks like until a couple of years down the road. We won't know what the 2022 class looks like for a couple of years. Like, these things are just going to take time to understand if he had success, if he failed. Right. I remember how much we loved the John Dorsey 2019 draft class. Then you go back and you look at that draft class and you realize that was an awful draft class. Even the 2018 one, right? If you take out the extra picks that they had because of Sachi Brown, that thing gets really dicey, right? You took Austin Corbett, number 33 overall, like Jannard Avery barely stayed on the team. Andrew's job's going to take longer to evaluate, but I don't think you can just fire Kevin and keep Andrew. It's going to be tough. I think a lot of fans feel like a change is justified at this point. Hey, man, coming into this game, I was fairly confident that Kevin would be able to show enough if given the opportunity to remind people that he's still a good coach. But maybe Deshaun Watson isn't the only person who's regressed. Maybe Wyatt Teller isn't the only person who's regressed. Maybe it's Kevin too. I don't know. Like, my mind tells me you should stick with Kevin throughout this year. It's been a weird, funky year. Maybe you just stick with them and you're rewarded for it down the line. You already signed him to a contract. But my gut tells me he won't make it out this season. Because how these games are unfolding and how this team is losing right now, it's just so bad. Like, it was not this bad in terms of how people are taking it when this team was winless. Like, this is as bad as it gets. It really is. It's as bad as it gets. Now, that being said, I think the only reason the Browns fire Kevin Stefanski is because they feel like they have somebody else they can bring in, right? They feel like they could get Mike Vrabel or Clint Kubiak or whoever, right? Like, they feel like they have somebody that they can bring in immediately. And maybe that's the case with Mike Vrabel. I don't know. But this is going to have to be a conversation that's going to be had and be taken very seriously. Because after this game, I don't know if Kevin makes it out of this year, man. Thursday night, he's got to pull a rabbit out the hat on Thursday night. He's got to pull out an upset. Because if they get stomped on Thursday night, man, I really don't know. And there's things you can point to, right? Maybe they could just fire Ken Dorsey. But I think this is way beyond firing Ken Dorsey. And to be honest, it's not stuff that I'm blaming on Kevin that really has to do exclusively with the offense. I thought the offense was fine in this game. They didn't put up a ton of points, but they gave the team a lot of opportunities to make points. Special teams kind of let them down. That's something I'll talk about later. But like, my complaints with Kevin aren't, oh, the offense stinks or his play calling stinks. Like, those aren't my complaints with Kevin right now. My complaints with Kevin are much more serious and much harder for him to escape. It's not that I think the play calling stinks. It's not that I think the offense stinks. is that I think that this team is not motivated to play for you. I think that this team is disconnected from your message. That's a more serious diagnosis, in my opinion. Another thing I want to get through here is, regardless of if the Browns fire Kevin Stefanski or not, and this is going to be something I talk about in my other video tonight, Bubba Ventrone got to go. Bubba Ventrone has to go. But back to Kevin. The overall indictment on him is, quite frankly, it feels like the main things he was bringing to the table outside of his offensive mind is rotten. It feels like the culture is rotten. We got Jed Wills saying he's making a business decision. We got all of these guys is not really showing effort and everything else. And the fans are worn with, like, this does not seem like a healthy dynamic anymore going on between the Browns, the players in that locker room, their relationship, the coaching. The one thing I gave them credit for throughout the first 6 weeks is that, hey, it looked like the team still ain't gave up on them. But I watched them right now, like, it feels like they don't really believe anymore. And that, more than play calling, that more than a bad offensive season, I think is damaging to Kevin Stefanski and his ability to keep this job. Because even if he's not the entire problem, right? Let's say that Kevin Stefanski is not the problem. He goes somewhere else and he's fine. It might just be the case that he just can't be here no more. That he's lost his grip on this locker room, on this set of leaders, and Myles Garrett's not going to go anywhere, right? Denzel Ward likely not going anywhere. A lot of the players that you re-signed, J.O.K., Grant Delpit, those guys aren't going anywhere. And if Kevin has lost his ability to reach those guys, then he's going to be the guy that has to go. Even if he's accomplished, even if it would be a tough pill to swallow, that might just be the situation. I have no joy in any of this. I do not love how this season is going, obviously, but this is the worst case scenario for how this season could have went. Like, we're in the darkest timeline right now for the 2024 Browns season, at least. Who knows, right? I was talking about this with, I think, Ab the other day. And shout out to Abby Mueller. Make sure you follow her. And we were talking about, hey, sometimes you got to go through the darkest timeline to come out clean. And we pointed to the Texans as an example of this, where I bet they felt pretty bad the first year that Deshaun sat out, the year that they traded Deshaun and all of that. I bet they felt pretty bad. And then they got to C.J. Stroud. And then they were fine, right? Maybe you just got to walk through the darkness to get to the light. Maybe that's where the Browns are. But, boy, this is going as bad as it could go. Hey, there's no way to sugarcoat it. This is going as bad as it can go. And talking about Kevin not surviving the season, as good as he's been at times, that's about as bad as it can go. And I don't think that there's any fighting it. His job is on the line. And there's a very real chance that he could not be the head coach anymore sooner than later. Some people, it's going to excite them. And I understand it at this point. This team's so bad that you want to see something change. But it's not a great scenario, right? You want to be able to maintain some type of consistency with your team. And this is not how you do it, right? You don't just maintain consistency to be consistent. You don't just maintain continuity to have continuity. You got to have some through line that always makes you think it's worthwhile, right? Mike Tomlin has had great years. He's had down years, but he's always had that baseline to leave his hat on for the Pittsburgh Steelers to get him through those tough years. It's like, hey, you're only going to be but so bad with Mike Tomlin. The same is true with John Harbaugh. We'll see if the same is true for Zach Taylor, but he's another coach who's not untouchable, right? But if you look at the two untouchable coaches in the AFC, they always have that to rest their hat on. If those two coaches had a season like this, they'd be on the hot seat. And think about what those two coaches have accomplished versus Kevin. I don't enjoy bringing this up, but that's just where the Browns are. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.